yet also carefully organized. And part of it has to do with a series of brilliant observations and difficult questions raised by his writing. How can we feel at home in the world? How can we find genuine connection with other human beings? How can we find enchantment in a world without God? How art can transform our lives, whether an artist's life can shed light on her work, what we can know about the world, other people, and ourselves, when not knowing is better than knowing, how sexual orientation affects questions of connection and identity, who we really are deep down, what memory tells us about our inner world, why it might be good to think of our life as a story, how we can feel like a single unified person when we are torn apart by competing desires and change over time, and why it matters to read Proust's writing itself, not just this book, even if I don't do a terrible job. That's quite a lot to talk about in 100-odd pages, and unfortunately I won't get to all kinds of other things I love in Proust. The character Françoise and her fascinating way of speaking, modern technology, habit, etymology, symbolic geography, metaphysics, metonymic metaphor, the magic of names, the complicated relationship to Henri Bergson, the partial love of discontinuity. But the themes in the previous paragraph are the kind Proust focused on when he discussed his book, so it doesn't seem totally unfair for a short, very short, introduction to focus on those. From time to time, I'll refer to Proust's articles, his letters, an interview he gave, and the prefaces he wrote to his translations of Ruskin. They help us see that Proust agrees with his narrator-protagonist on some things, even if he disagrees with him on others. But I won't have much to say about the short stories, the pastiches, or the abandoned early manuscript, published posthumously as Jean Saintoya, even though there is some lovely stuff in each. When people say, "I'm reading Proust," they usually mean, "I'm reading that 3,000-page novel that had better be the masterpiece you promised me it was." I think they're right, and I think it is. Chapter 1. Art and Life. A book like this would normally start with a few pages of biography. It would tell you who Proust's parents were, where he was born, who he dated, what he ate for breakfast, and all kinds of other juicy information. There is some juicy information here and there. André Gide took a pass on publishing Swann's Way when it was offered to him, and Proust had the last laugh by winning the Goncourt Prize in 1919. But there isn't that much of it, and in any case, with apologies to anyone who wanted to hear more of that kind of thing, it isn't what I'm going to focus on. That's partly because biographical information is so readily available online, as well as in some wonderful books, and partly because there's so much else to talk about. But it's mainly because Proust would have disapproved, and I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror if I didn't. What I'd rather do instead is explain why Proust would have disapproved, because, fascinatingly enough, this disapproval ended up generating part of his literary masterpiece, In Search of Lost Time. Why you shouldn't want a biography. Proust was reacting against one of the most prominent critics of the 19th century, Charles-Augustin Sainte-Beuve. When Sainte-Beuve wrote about the novelists of his age, he didn't just analyze and assess their books, he also talked about what they were like as dinner companions. That, Proust thought, is why Sainte-Beuve ended up getting it wrong about giants like Balzac, Stendhal, Nerval, Flaubert, and Manet. Sainte-Beuve's mistake? Explaining the true Fontaine or Manet, the one that is only found in their work, on the basis of the mortal man. Proust's conclusion was simple but important. It doesn't matter whether a writer is good or bad company. You can be a brilliant artist and a lousy talker, or a dauber with a gift of the gab. You can make great art, but not fully understand what you've accomplished. That's what Proust thought about the painter Chardin. Or even get it wrong about what you've accomplished. That's what Proust's narrator thinks about the playwright Molière. You can be an unfaithful spouse.